Samantha Lewis never imagined that marrying the man she loved would bring her into a battlefield she never asked for. She was warm, genuine, and came from a simple, middle-class family. Her husband, Daniel Carter, came from the opposite world: wealth, status, and influence. When Samantha and Daniel first met, it was magical. He was charming, thoughtful, and he promised her a life where love mattered more than money. For a while, it seemed true. But then came the Carters. Daniel's mother, Margaret Carter, was the kind of woman who walked into a room and everyone noticed. Polished, controlling, a matriarch who valued money, power, and reputation above all else. And from the moment she laid eyes on Samantha, she decided one thing: Samantha was not good enough for her son. "Sweet girl," Margaret would say with a fake smile. "But really, Daniel, a Lewis? A girl from a small house and no fortune? What will people think?" Daniel always brushed it off in the beginning. "Mother, please, I love her. That's all that matters." But behind those closed doors, Margaret's whispers began to grow louder, and Samantha started to feel the cracks. Family dinners turned into interrogation sessions. Margaret would ask about Samantha's cooking, her job, her family background. Every answer was met with a thin smile, followed by a cutting remark. Daniel's sisters, Rebecca and Claire, weren't any better. They mocked her clothes, her accent, even the way she carried herself. And slowly, Samantha felt herself shrinking in that grand Carter mansion, a place that was never truly her home. But Samantha tried. She cooked, she cleaned, she hosted. She put every ounce of effort into winning them over. And Daniel, at first, he held her hand under the table, whispering, "Ignore them, you're my world." But as the years passed, his grip loosened. The whispers grew stronger. And Samantha began to see a painful truth. Love, in the Carter family, was conditional. And Margaret was pulling every string. The foundation of her marriage was beginning to crack. But Samantha didn't know then that the storm had only just begun. At first, Samantha thought she could endure it. The cutting remarks, the constant comparisons to better women that Margaret paraded in front of Daniel, the whispers of, "You deserve more, son." But slowly, those whispers became Daniel's spots, and then his words. It started small. One evening at dinner, Daniel snapped when Samantha burned the roast. "My mother was right," he muttered. "You're not cut out for this life." The words stung, but Samantha brushed them aside. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he didn't mean it. But then came the late nights at work, the excuses, the sudden coldness in his voice, and worst of all, the look in his eyes. The man who once promised her love above all else was now looking at her like a burden. Behind the scenes, Margaret was weaving her web. In private, she told Daniel, "Your wife will drag you down. She'll never fit into high society. She doesn't understand business. She doesn't understand power. One day, she'll embarrass you in front of everyone." Rebecca and Claire added their venom too. "She's holding you back, Daniel. Do you really think she can ever stand beside you at those events?" Day by day, Daniel's loyalty shifted, not to the woman who loved him, but to the family who despised her. The breaking point came on a night Samantha would never forget. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. She had saved for weeks, planning a quiet, intimate evening with Daniel. A candlelit dinner, a small gift, a heartfelt letter. But Daniel never came home. He was at a gala, with his mother by his side. And when Samantha called, desperate for an explanation, his words cut deeper than any knife. "Stop embarrassing me, Samantha. You'll never belong in my world." Maybe my mother was right all along. The following weeks blurred into pain. Arguments turned into silence. Silence turned into papers. Divorce papers. Margaret sat at the lawyer's table that day, smiling as if she'd won a battle. Daniel didn't even look Samantha in the eye. He signed, and just like that, the love story she had built her life on was shattered. Samantha walked out of the Carter mansion with nothing but a suitcase. No money, no support, no husband. And as she stood on the curb that night, watching the mansion lights glow in the distance, Margaret's final words echoed in her ears. "You'll regret ever thinking you belonged in this family." But Margaret was wrong, because regret was coming. And when it arrived, it would belong not to Samantha, but to the Carters. Samantha's life after the divorce was empty. No mansion, no savings, no husband who once swore eternal love. Just a small apartment with peeling paint and a heart shattered into pieces. For weeks, she barely ate. She stayed curled up in bed, haunted by every cruel word Daniel and Margaret had thrown at her. The world outside moved on, but Samantha, she was frozen in pain. And yet, in her silence, something began to grow. Not hope, not forgiveness, but fire. The kind of fire only betrayal can light. She realized something important. Margaret hadn't just taken her husband. She had tried to take her worth, and Samantha would never let her win. So she started small. She sold the little jewelry she had left and used the money to enroll in a business development course. She worked part-time at a bookstore during the day and studied late into the night. Every insult she remembered, "You'll never belong, you're not cut out for this life," became fuel. 1 year later, she was running a tiny online shop selling handmade items. 2 years later, she had transformed it into a boutique brand. Her designs were different. Elegant, simple, empowering. Women loved them. And then, a spark of fate. One of her dresses caught the attention of a rising social media influencer. A single post went viral. Within days, orders flooded in. Within weeks, Samantha had investors calling. She turned her small startup into a full-fledged company. And soon, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. But it wasn't just success that pushed her forward. It was revenge. Each contract signed, each deal closed, each dollar earned was proof that she could stand on her own, that she didn't need Daniel, that she didn't need Margaret's approval. And yet, deep inside, Samantha wasn't satisfied. Because money and success weren't enough. Not yet. 3 years after the divorce, Samantha had built an empire. She owned luxury stores in several cities. She was invited to the very same galas and business events Margaret once claimed she'd never belonged to. And one evening, fate brought her face to face with the Carters again. The ballroom was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers, flowing gowns, champagne glasses clinking. And there, across the room, Margaret stood proudly with Daniel and his new fiancée, Rebecca's cousin, the perfect society woman. For a moment, the room seemed to blur. Memories of pain rushed back. But Samantha didn't flinch. She walked into that ballroom dressed in one of her own designs, a gown that turned heads the second she entered. And the whispers began. "Who is she? She's stunning. Isn't that the owner of the new luxury brand?" Margaret's smile faltered. Daniel's eyes widened. They hadn't expected her. Not like this. Samantha didn't approach them. Not yet. She didn't need to, because in that moment, they understood. She was no longer the girl they had cast aside. She was the woman who rose from the ashes, stronger, richer, and untouchable. But Samantha wasn't finished, not even close, because revenge is best served slowly. And as Samantha stood in that ballroom, watching Margaret whisper frantically into Daniel's ear, she knew the time had come. The Carters had destroyed her once. Now, she would destroy them. Samantha didn't need to storm over and scream in their faces that night. Her silence, her elegance, her success spoke louder than any words ever could. But she wasn't there for a fleeting victory. She wanted them to feel everything she had felt. The humiliation, the betrayal, the emptiness of being abandoned. And so her plan began. The Carters still lived in their lavish bubble. Daniel worked in finance, but his reputation had grown fragile. Whispers of risky investments. Rumors of debts. Margaret still clung to her influence, attending every gala, every luncheon, desperate to maintain her image as the perfect matriarch. And Rebecca? She flaunted her new engagement, acting as though she had won. But Samantha knew something they didn't. Success isn't built on charm alone. It's built on control. And Samantha had built plenty of that. Step 1 was Daniel. Through one of her companies, Samantha quietly bought shares in the investment firm Daniel worked for. She kept her name hidden behind a holding group, becoming one of the silent but powerful investors. It didn't take long before she started pulling strings. Every bad call Daniel made, it was magnified. Every small mistake whispered into the ears of the right people. Soon, Daniel's colleagues began to see him as reckless. Clients withdrew. His once promising career started to crumble. And the best part, Daniel had no idea that the force pushing him down was Samantha. Step 2, Margaret. Margaret had always cared about appearances. She lived for the judgment of others. So Samantha decided to shatter that. She hired a discreet investigator. Every dirty secret Margaret tried to hide, the shady property deals, the hush money paid to cover up a scandal involving her brother, Samantha gathered it all. Then, she leaked it. Not directly. She made sure it slipped into the hands of gossip columnists and rival socialites. And like wildfire, Margaret's perfect image burned. One by one, her friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. She wasn't the queen of the room anymore. She was the woman everyone whispered about behind their champagne glasses. Margaret had wanted Samantha gone because she wasn't worthy. Now it was Margaret who was unworthy, an outcast in the very world she once ruled. Step 3, Rebecca. Rebecca had always smiled sweetly while stabbing Samantha in the back. But her engagement, her upcoming marriage into another wealthy family, that was Samantha's final target. You see, Rebecca's fiancé's family valued honesty and respect. So when Samantha anonymously sent them evidence of Rebecca's lies, her manipulative behavior, her involvement in gossip and scheming, they were horrified. The engagement collapsed. Rebecca was humiliated, abandoned at the altar of her own lies. One by one, Samantha pulled the strings, and one by one, they fell. Daniel lost his career. Margaret lost her reputation. Rebecca lost her future. And none of them knew who was behind it. Until one night. It was a charity gala. The Carters, desperate to cling to the little they had left, showed up in forced smiles and borrowed clothes. And there, Samantha appeared again. This time, she didn't just blend into the crowd, she commanded it. The host announced her as the keynote speaker. Please welcome Samantha Blake, founder and CEO of Blake & Co., one of the fastest growing luxury brands in the country. The applause was thunderous. Margaret froze. Daniel's face drained of color. Rebecca's hands trembled. And then Samantha stepped onto the stage. Her voice was smooth, controlled, every word dripping with power. I was once told that I didn't belong in rooms like this, that I wasn't worthy of respect, that I would never make it without someone else's name attached to mine. She paused, her eyes locked on Margaret, on Daniel, on Rebecca. But I stand here tonight as proof that those words were wrong, that strength is born not from privilege, but from pain, and that no betrayal, no matter how cruel, can silence someone determined to rise. The audience erupted in applause. But the Carters? They sat frozen, exposed, defeated. They finally knew the woman they had discarded was the very one who had taken everything from them. Samantha didn't go to them. She didn't need to, because the look on their faces, the shame, the regret, the realization, was all she had ever wanted. She walked out of that ballroom with her head high, and behind her, the Carters crumbled into silence. But Samantha's revenge wasn't about ruining them completely. It was about balance. It was about making them feel what she once felt. And now that they had, the question was, would Samantha forgive them? Or leave them in the ashes forever? The Carters sat frozen in their seats, their perfect masks shattered. The crowd's applause still rang through the ballroom, but none of it was for them. It was for Samantha, the woman they had called unworthy, the woman they had discarded like a shadow, the woman who now stood tall, radiant, untouchable. For days afterward, whispers spread across town. Everyone knew the truth now. Samantha Blake wasn't a victim. She wasn't the quiet wife they had once bullied into silence. She was a powerhouse, a self-made success who had risen higher than any of them. And Daniel? His career was over. The firm distanced itself from him, quietly letting him go after too many scandals. His name carried no weight anymore. Margaret? She became the gossip she once thrived on. Her invitations stopped coming. Her influence, gone. Rebecca? Her engagement collapsed so publicly that her name became a punchline. The sweet, innocent act she wore like perfume was stripped away. The Carters had lost everything, and they knew. Samantha had been behind it all. But Samantha, she didn't gloat. She didn't go knocking on their door to rub salt into the wounds. Because true revenge isn't about shouting, "I won." It's about walking away, leaving them to choke on the ashes of their own cruelty. 1 week later, Samantha received a letter. It was from Daniel. His handwriting was messy, desperate. "I was wrong. I should have stood by you. I see now what you've become, and I am ashamed. If there's even a shred of forgiveness left in you, please give me a chance to say it in person." Samantha read it once, then again. Her heart twisted for a moment. The memory of love they once shared, the nights of laughter, the promises whispered in the dark. ... But then she remembered the pain, the betrayal, the moment he chose silence over her. And she set the letter down, untouched. The Carters wanted forgiveness. But forgiveness is not something owed. It is something earned. And they had done nothing to earn it. So Samantha didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than words. She walked away from the Carters for the last time, not with bitterness, not with hatred, but with peace. Because in the end, Samantha didn't just win revenge. She won herself back. And maybe, That's the truest form of revenge of all. Not destroying those who betrayed you, but proving you never needed them to begin with.